Next we're going to assemble the electronics base sled here. And even if you aren't going to use dual deployment, you're going to need this in the rocket to act as a bulkhead for the payload section. Now, if you're absolutely positively sure you're never going to use this, you can do some modification of the coupler and just put a regular bulkhead in for that. But those types of parts are not available here directly. So I'm going to assemble this assuming that we at least want the possibility of dual deployment. Alright, so we're going to go through and cut out our pieces here. Okay, and if the little holes or remnants of what are in the holes there are still remaining, go ahead and pull those out. A lot of times these will fall out during packaging or shipping. Okay, so that's the sled itself. And then we've got these bulkheads here. And most of the time you can just pop these out. These are made out of plywood, so they're pretty strong. Alright, and again, we need these little donut-shaped things. Now all of the little filler pieces can just be discarded. We won't need them for the next steps. Next we need to make sure that everything is going to fit, so we're just going to do some dry fitting here. Alright, and two of these discs are a little bit smaller than the other two, and so those will go together eventually here. Alright, but the slots in the disc should go over this piece. And there's actually quite a bit of difference there. If that is the case, you can either sand down this a little bit, you don't want to do too much, or you can open up the holes here. And I'm going to refer over to our illustration here. So the discs that have more holes in them go on the tab that says Apogee. Right, so that's one set that's going to go on the opposite side. Okay, so these ones will go on this end, and they're too tight. And then these ones will go on this end, which is also too tight. And then this piece here goes in this slot, and it fits fine. To make this fit, I'm going to first start with some 150 grit sandpaper and just do a little sanding here on the tabs. Okay, now I want to be careful, especially on this end, because with this slot cut out here for a screw mount, which is what this will be, there's not a lot of material left in here. Now once this does get glued into place like that, the glue and the thickness of this wood will help reinforce that. But right now that's kind of a weak spot. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and try putting stuff back on, and it's still not going to do it. Okay, so now I'm going to take a small flat file, and I'm going to file out the insides of these. And this is something you want to frequently go back and check and find out whether it's fitting or not. Alright, and that side fits. Alright, now this one is going to go right through here. Alright, now it should line up with one of these sets of holes here. Alright, with that one. Now we may have to take this off and turn things over here as we get along. Alright, so we'll go ahead and take those off for the moment. Okay, and this is supposed to go into this side where it says Apogee on the face. And here we're just going to take some wood glue. Alright, I'm going to put it on the smaller of the two ends and between the holes. Okay, doesn't really matter which way it faces. So this is going to go in here, just like that. Now we're going to want to remove excess glue here, especially in this area because it's getting close to where the altimeter board is going to set for some of these. Now the actual placement of the altimeter will depend upon the size of the circuit board as well as where terminals are and things like that. My glue has set for a few minutes here, and now I'm going to take this set of discs, and this should be oriented this way so that the side with two holes is going to be upward, so in the same direction as the Apogee logo there. I'm going to push those on. I'm doing this mainly just for keeping this stable and upright. And what we're going to do next are take these two weld nuts or T-nuts, and we're going to stick these through the backs of these. Now there's quite a bit of play in there, so we want to try and get it centered, and especially for this one here, it's really tight in there, so just be aware of that. Okay, now what we're going to do is use some thick super glue, so gel type super glue here, and we're going to apply this mainly to the rim. Right, but also put some up here on the shaft. Alright, but we want to make sure we don't get any on the discs here. So I'm going to put that in there and stick it through like that. Alright, and then make sure that we don't have any glue in the threads. We don't, that's good. Alright, and we're going to do the same thing for the other side. Okay, and then this is going to go into the other hole there. Squish that into place as well. Alright, and we're going to set that aside to dry for a little bit. I've removed these discs that I was using to prop up the holder for the two T-nuts there. This will actually be a removable part once this is finished. Now the discs on the other side here, so the ones marked B1 and B2, those will be permanently attached to this side. So once again, we're going to use a little bit of wood glue. Okay, and the actual numbers here should face outward. So initially we're just going to put a little bit of glue here on the two ends, the two edges. And if you want, you can put just a little bit there and a little bit there. Okay, but if you're oriented the same way I am, the hole here in the B1 disc should be towards you, right, on the same side as the switch label there. Alright, and then you can smooth those in. We'll actually make fillets there in just a little bit. Alright, and then next we're going to put some glue in here. Don't get this really thick, otherwise it could result in the disc bowing or bulging here. Alright, and then we're going to align the hole here with the hole here. Place that on. Alright, and squeeze that down. Alright, and then take a tissue or a rag and wipe off that excess glue. We actually want that lip there. Alright, and also try and center. I might have a little bit of play in it there. Alright, and I'm going to take a couple of little clamps here to hold that together while it's drying. And I'm going to let that glue dry for at least 15 minutes. The bulkhead plates here have glued enough that we can work with the rest of it. So I'm turned around now. Now the apogee tongue is over here. And this one, when we put it on, should face like this. Okay. So the two holes there, the smaller one will be facing away from you. Now we're not going to glue these on to the sled. We are going to use it as a guide though. We have to glue the two together. Now here we've got to be particularly careful. I almost glued that. In fact, let's take some of that away. Alright, because we don't want glue on the threads of the T-nuts. And we don't want to glue the disc to the sled. So I'm going to use just a very fine amount of glue here. And this will only be temporary. As soon as we get the bulkheads aligned, then we'll pull it out again. Okay, so that should go like that. Everything's aligned there. I'm going to take my clamps once more. Put those on. Alright, now I'm going to pull this whole thing back off. Okay, and make sure that we've got an even edge around here. Alright, if you've got a lot of excess glue, go ahead and wipe that off. Alright, and then we're going to let that dry for a few minutes. The glue is dry on the bulkheads, and so now we're going to temporarily fit the coupler here onto the sled. Now the end of the coupler that has the big hole here is going to align with the switch diagram there. So we're just going to put this on and go ahead and place this bulkhead on as well. Got to make sure we get it going the right way. I think we may have gotten a little bit of glue down in there. Or the wood just expanded. Alright, so if that's the case, we'll just come back to our file here and just shave that down a little bit. It looks like the disc holes did not quite line up perfectly here. And so we get one edge that's a little bit raised over the other. Okay, I'll try that again. That fits much better. Okay, so we should be together like that. Alright, and then I'm going to rotate this until I can just see the floor of the sled through the hole. Now, frankly, it looks like they put this hole just a little bit too far aft, but we'll go with it for now. I don't think we should be seeing the bulkhead through the hole there. But what we want to do is mark the sled where the center of the hole is. And that's why I think this hole's a little bit off. Alright, because what's going to happen here is once this is out again, that's where that switch, let me get the switch. Okay, so this switch is going to get mounted so that it's at the center there. Alright, so this will probably work. Let's see if I can do this while keeping that switch in position. So if I put my tube back on, stop moving switch. Alright, we rotate that around. Yeah, that'll probably still work. Because what you'll do to activate this is put a small probe or pencil or something in there and click that switch on and off. Now, when you're ready to do this, you can just glue this switch in wherever it needs to be with epoxy or with gel type super glue. And you just basically you glue it on this edge and on this edge. If it's like mine where you've got to stick it all the way in the corner there. If your coupler has the hole a little bit more forward, your switch might be up here. Okay, but you want to make sure that the switch does not extend beyond the sled itself. Alright, and that you've got it in nice and straight there. I am not going to actually glue this in until I'm ready to put electronics in it. Okay, which I may or may not do before doing the rest of the rocket. Now the holes that are in here are pre-drilled to fit either an Altus Metrum Easy Mini, which is one of my possibilities, or a Perfect Flight Stratologger CF, which I don't have. Now the other altimeters I have are not on that list, and so if you're going to use something that they've not pre-drilled it for, simply place the circuit board against the sled here, mark where the mounting holes are, and then drill those out with a 1/16 inch drill bit, and then you're going to tap those with a 440 tap, because that's the size of the nylon screws that we'll use to hold this in place. Okay, and they go into the details of that in the instructions. It's pretty straightforward. For now, though, I'm going to leave this without any electronics mounted in it. For now, I'm going to assemble this without electronics. And so I'm going to put this back on here, within view of where the switch would go. Okay, I'm just going to put it about there. And then I'm going to put the other bulkhead on here, making sure to line it up with the threaded T-nuts. So that should close up like that. And then we have these two wing screws here. Those are going to screw into place. If you want to, you can put a number 6 washer in there, because the flanges on the wing screws are actually almost the same size as these holes. And so I've assembled a few other of these types of eBays, and I've had to do that on all of them. You just take a washer in there to spread the force a little bit. As if you keep screwing these, they'll actually go into that wood. Okay. Something else to keep in mind, a lot of times for kits that are big enough that you can actually put an eBay in them, instead of just tying into the tabs here, I like to use quick links. The problem is that an 1/8" quick link, which is typically what you'd find with this size of a rocket, does not open its jaws quite enough to allow these tabs through. So you may have to sand these to a taper in the front if you want to do that. I'm going to go ahead and just tie on the shock cords like they show in the instructions for this rocket. But if you like to use that option like I do, you'll just have to do a little more sanding here so that you taper the end. That allows the quick link to go in and couple in there. You may also have to remove one or both of the wing nuts or wing bolts there in order to get a quick link in there. Okay, so it gets really kind of tight. Now in the instructions, the next steps are all involved with the final assembly, mounting the coupler / eBay into the upper tube here, assembling all the shock cords and parachutes and everything, and then they paint it last. Now depending on what type of paint scheme you want to use, you may want to paint the different sections of the rocket before doing the final assembly. Especially if you want to do something like paint the base of the rocket one color and the upper tube another color and the nose cone yet another color. All right. In the illustration, okay, this shows having about the upper 2/3 of the rocket being white, the lower part being red with gray fins, and then the nose cone being red. I do know that I'm not going to do it that way. I haven't quite decided on what my color scheme is, but it's not going to be that one. So if you want to, at this point, start priming and painting your rocket parts, that's fine. You just, when we go on with the video here, just keep in mind that you want to paint this first or not, however you want to do it. But then we'll just keep on with the assembly as if it's already been done. Moving over to the nose cone, one of the things we want to do here is sand this because it's got some marks here that are left by the molding process. These two rings around the nose cone are also part of the molding process, although they're nice and regular, so if you like them as decorations, you could leave them there, and I've done that for some of my models. But the other two seams here will be partly raised and partly sunken here. Now for the raised part, we can just sand it. If you want to fill in the sunken part there, you can use a plastic model putty like this one from Testors. Other brands are also available. But these, you just smooth them in and then you sand them back off again. For the most part, if you just sand these really well, what's left of that seam you can fill in with some primer. So I'm going to take this off camera so that I can wet sand this. I will start with some 150 grit sandpaper, actually dry sanding with that, and then moving up to 220, 320, and then 400 grit sandpaper while wet sanding. So for the dry sanding bit here, mainly I'm knocking down these rings, and again, if you like them, you can leave them on there, and I'm going to knock down the ridges here, and then I'm going to give the entire nose a light sanding to help make the paint stick better. Now the disadvantage of dry sanding is it tends to pill up the plastic, especially as it starts getting hotter due to friction. But it also does take off these ridges a lot faster. Now here you can see I've knocked down a lot of those rings. There's still a little bit left there. And the seams, you can still see them, but they're much less noticeable, and they're certainly not as raised. In fact, this seam, we've gotten rid of most of it there. So I'm going to keep doing the same type of thing, but with finer sandpaper and with a little bit of water to flush things away. I'll do that off camera and come back. Here I have the upper body tube and the nose cone. Now the body tube just needs some primer on it, doesn't need any other preparation. This has been sanded up to 320 grit sandpaper. You can still see a little bit of seam there and maybe just a little bit of the ring there. Those will fill in with primer, and so that's my next task here, is I will spray both of these with a filling sandable primer that will fill in a lot of the smaller imperfections there, and then we'll go on and paint these. My fin fillets are mostly dry, and they're going to need another coat. But in the meantime here, I'm going to put on the motor retainer. And so I'm mixing up a small amount of 5-minute epoxy here. And generally it's a good idea to wear gloves when you're working with epoxy because repeated exposure can cause allergic type reactions. Alright, so now that I've got this mixed up, this is just going to go around the outside of my engine mount here. And you can do this with a fairly heavy amount, because anything that's excess will simply be forced down to the base of the motor mount and the centering ring. Okay, and then we'll just take the male portion of the ring combo, we'll stick that over and just give it a twist back and forth a few times here to set well, and then wait 5 minutes while the epoxy sets. I'm still working on the fillets for the main part of the rocket, but while that's going on, I'm going to do a little trick here. This is optional, but I found that over time, the openings of body tubes, including the payload bays and such, get a little mangled. So I'm just applying some regular viscosity super glue here, right along the edge. And as this soaks in and hardens, it will reinforce the cardboard here, so that we're less likely to have wrinkling or other damage as the coupler is put in and out and ejected and repositioned and all that kind of stuff. And so we'll just let that soak in for just a few seconds, and then you can take a wiper or paper towel here and then just wipe off the excess without sticking your fingers together. Okay, now this will dry completely. Now somehow I've got a little blob of wood glue in there. Not sure how that happened, but I'll have to trim that off a bit later. As I said, this is optional, but I found it really helpful on a lot of my rockets. While we're waiting for glue and paint and everything else to dry, we can go ahead and work on the parachutes. Now we have two of them here, so the larger one is for the main chute, and if you're not going to use dual deployment, this will be the only one you need to mount. The smaller one here is for the drogue chute, and you will need this one if you're going to do dual deployment. Now, both of these require assembly, and they also can be used at two different sizes. Okay, so this one, the smaller drogue chute, can be cut out either as an 8-inch chute or a 12-inch chute, and the instructions recommend using the 8-inch one. The larger chute can be cut either as a 32-inch or a 24-inch, and they recommend doing the 24-inch, regardless of whether you're using single or dual deployment. So we'll come back to this one later. There we go. Alright, the excess material can just be disposed of. Next, we're going to put these reinforcements on. So each reinforcement goes on the dotted lines here. Alright, now make sure it comes over the edge. We don't want the white part sticking out, or the adhesive on it could make it so the parachute does not open correctly. So it's better to be inside a little bit. And then take a pen or a pencil and poke holes through these. Don't use a hobby knife, as the blade can cut through the reinforcements as well. Next, we're going to take the shroud line material here and remove it from the tape. Be careful that you don't cut the lines. Make sure I didn't there. Yep, it's okay. Alright, now you're going to want to carefully untangle this to get in one big length. Alright, now we need to cut this into 3 equal lengths. So to do that, take one end between your thumb and index finger, and then on your middle fingers, make a loop on one side and then a loop on the other, and you're just going to pull apart here until now you've got a loop and a string and a loop and a string. Alright, hold on to those on one end and just cut them even. Alright, now keep these so that they're always the same length. I'll pull these through my fingers here till we get up to the other side where we also have a loop and a string, and we're going to cut those off evenly as well. And now we have 3 equal length strings. Alright, so take one of those, pass it through one of the holes you just made, and now you're going to tie a double knot or 2 half hitches on here. And the trick to this is try and keep the amount of string that you've used for the knot consistent throughout. Okay, and then you can just come over to an adjacent one and do the same thing. All right, and then you're going to repeat this for the other 2 strings. Okay, now if we turn this over and gather all of the shroud lines here together, right, just kind of loop those around one finger and then hold the parachute sheet in the middle and then pull everything taut, and all of those edges should be together like we have here. Alright, if they're not, if one's really way up or way down, it usually means you've got your shroud lines uneven. Now sometimes you can just twist one way or the other and that'll do it for you. Okay, or if it's really out of whack, you just need to retie it. Okay, now if it's just a little uneven, it's probably fine. Now a little bit later when we go to assemble the entire recovery system, we'll be tying the parachutes onto loops in the shock cords. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you know I don't like tying parachutes. I really prefer to have some way of easily removing them and putting them back on and changing them out. So I'm going to use a snap swivel here. And for this type of rocket, we're kind of on the cusp of size here where you would easily use a snap swivel for a small rocket that uses this type of parachute. But this Katana Jr is pretty big, and we're getting to the point where we'd start using quick links. Alright, but for this one, at least for the drogue chute, I'm going to go ahead and use a snap swivel. So just tie that on there. And then go ahead and check your shroud line lengths once more. If everything still looks okay to you, then go ahead and put a little drop of white glue or wood glue on that knot to keep it from unraveling. Right, and it doesn't take much, just a little tiny bit there, and work that into the knot and let that dry. And then when we're ready to attach it, we can open up the snap there, stick it through a loop of the shock cord, and close it back up again. The main parachute goes together in much the same way, except that obviously it's bigger, and it also has more shroud lines to it. This is actually an octagonal parachute. You may need a big table to do this one. Okay, now again, we want the inner parachute here, so the 24-inch one. Now, something that is a little bit different here, we have a longer shroud line for each one, and there are now going to be 4 sets instead of 3. Alright, so again, we need to untangle the original material here, which could take a bit longer. Okay, so for this one we're going to start with the 2 ends. And we got a little knot here. There we go. Okay, so put the 2 ends here even with each other, and now keeping those taut, we're going to go through the entire length. Alright, so we end up with a loop here. Now we're going to go all the way back. Alright, and bring our loop up to the ends here. And we're just going to cut all of those off evenly. Okay, now I'm going to go backward again, keeping all these taut. Alright, till we hit the 2 loops, and they've shifted a little bit, which is why I do this. Alright, we're going to cut those ones off as well. So now I have 4 pieces of string, 4 shroud lines, and the rest of this is going to go together just like the 8-inch one did. So I'm going to tie a shroud line between 2 adjacent holes and just keep moving around it here. Alright, now as before, I'm going to gather up all the shroud lines here. And this is a little harder to do under the camera with this size of a parachute, but we'll try and get things here. Okay, so once more I've got all my shroud lines gathered on one finger here. And now I'm going to take the middle of the parachute sheet and gather everything together. Okay, so we'll pull the wrinkles out of that. All those corners should be about the same spot, and they are. Okay, so again I'm going to use a snap swivel. This is an even larger one. If you wanted to use quick links, I would recommend using a barrel swivel here instead, and then attaching the quick link to it. As I said, we're kind of right on the borderline between heavy mid-power and light high-power. Alright, and then once more we'll check our corners here. Those look good. And with that in place, we'll give it another little shot of glue. Alright, and we'll let that dry on both parachutes. My upper body tube and nose cone have finished paint in a nice silver color here. And we can go ahead and assemble this part of the rocket. Now the main part is still being painted, and so we'll come back to it later on. Now to install the avionics bay here, we first want to take the upper shock cord, and we're going to treat this the same way we did the lower shock cord. So first thing I'm going to do is just take a little bit of super glue and apply that to the frayed ends here so they don't get worse. Alright, once again we just apply this to the area right below the fray. Alright, just let that penetrate for a few seconds. And then just take a tissue or a rag or a paper towel, whatever you got handy, and just wipe off the excess. And then you can take your hobby knife and just cut off the frayed part now. Okay, and now I'm going to take one end and tie a water knot, basically an overhand loop. Like that. Okay, and then I can take the other end, I'm going to pass that through the eye there on the tab. Okay, now this is the forward end, right, and that's going to go through my knot here. Okay, and then that can come all the way through. Okay, and we've got it tightened like that. Okay, the same thing will happen down here on this end with the main or the aft shock cord. It will attach up here, but we'll have to put it on in a little bit different fashion. We'll come back to it. Alright, now I'm going to just wrap this up briefly. We're going to stick it into the forward tube there. Alright, and that's going to follow with our avionics bay. So here we want to make sure that it fits. And this can be fairly snug because it's not going to have to come out again. Alright, and so the bigger hole above the three smaller holes is going to match up here with the switch hole in just a moment. As soon as we find it. There we go. Alright, and with that matched, all three holes down here should also match. And then we're going to take our plastic rivets here, and those just poke in and they push the plunger down. Okay, and if you need to remove them, you just pull the plunger back up and they come right back off again. And we probably will do that when we go to attach the aft shock cord to the avionics bay. Okay, now here you can tie the knot directly to the eyelet here. You could use a quick link to attach it, or you can do what they do is they'll tie another water knot here basically. To make a slip knot, and then what they do here is pass this through. Alright, pull a big loop through, pull that over, and then pull it taut to hold it on. Okay, and that's what I recommend doing unless you want to use a quick link here, and that is what I'm going to do on mine, just as soon as I remember how to get this off again. There we go. Here I have an 1/8 inch quick link, and we can just open that up. Alright, and then that can fit over the eyelet. And then we just attach our loop onto here and close it back up again. Now this does add a little bit of weight, but it also makes it a lot more versatile. And you can also hook the parachute on here in the same manner. Okay. Now you could even do this at the Avionics bay end, but you need to use a little loop of material, or you need to sand this tab down, okay, because an 1/8 inch quick link will not fit over that, okay, but you can sand that down and taper it. If you go up to a little bigger quick link, alright, so this is a 3/16 inch, it's still not quite big enough, and if you get even bigger than this, it won't even go through the hole there. So you have to do something to that tab, or you can simply take a small loop of Kevlar of the same strength as this. It looks to be about 350 pounds test, and you can just tie a loop through here and then quick link the shock cord loop to that loop. Okay, so that's kind of up to you and how much additional weight you want to put on here. But I like to have at least the quick link up here on the nose cone. Okay. Now, if you're using dual deployment, normally your main parachute will go here, and that main parachute can simply tie in here at the quick link or on the nose eyelet itself. I would recommend actually tying in at the quick link so that if this breaks, you only lose the nose cone and not the rest of the rocket. If you're going to use this for single deployment, then what you want to do is just wrap all this stuff up without a parachute on it, tuck it away, and then use some masking tape around the shoulder to make that an extra firm fit, so it doesn't come out when just from the shock of ejection. All right, and instead we'll put the main parachute on the aft shock cord where the drogue chute would be if we were doing this as dual deployment. Okay, but we're going to have to wait on that till the paint finishes drying on the aft part of the rocket. The paint on the main body of the rocket is finished. Now if you look closely here at the red fin, it's got kind of a matte appearance to it, and this is probably due to putting the masking tape on a little bit too early. You can try sanding this with some 800 to 1000 grit sandpaper, and or you could clear coat this with a gloss clear coat, which is what I'm going to do with it after everything's put on anyway. So I think that'll cover up most of that. But if you're watching this video before building this, give yourself maybe, I put this on 24 hours, maybe give it 48 hours before putting that on. Also, I left it on longer than I normally do just because of life going on. And so that could be another thing, is make sure you can remove that tape as soon as you can. All right, regardless of that paint problem, we'll go ahead and do the final assembly. Okay, so here we've got the upper part of the rocket, and we're going to shake the loop out here. Okay, now as I mentioned with the upper part of the rocket when we were putting that shock cord on, if this rocket were just a little bit bigger, I'd be using quick links for everything. But the quick links don't fit readily into this type of an Avionics bay. So we're going to do this a little differently as soon as I can get it unraveled. Some people really have a talent for doing this, where you can just seemingly take a simple cord and tie it into a big knot, and I'm one of them. Alright, now we're going to try this one way, and this is similar to what they have showing in the instructions. The question is whether I've got enough shock cord to do this without taking the whole thing apart. Alright, so I'm going to start by making my water knot loop again here. Alright, and I'm going to pass that through the eyelet. Okay, and now I'm going to take the shock cord just at any point. Alright, so it's behind the loop right now. I'm going to pull that through and make this big loop here. Alright, and I'm going to pull that loop all the way over the upper body tube and nose cone. Okay, and then we're going to pull that all through again. There we go. And we can just move that down. And what it's done is it's tied itself into a half hitch there, but that's okay. Okay, so that's nice and secure. Now I will go ahead and pull my loop around here, and like I did with the other ones, we'll go ahead and put just a little touch of super glue on that knot so that it does not come unraveled. Okay, and we just let that dry. In fact, we don't have to let it fully dry. We can just take a tissue here and wipe off the excess. Alright, now there's not a lot of room here to attach the parachute directly, so I'm just going to come down here. Let me see if they recommend a certain length for this. Okay, I don't see a specific amount specified, but I'm just going to come down here. We'll call it 15 centimeters or so, or about 6 to 8 inches. And I'm just going to tie a loop here. And then we can tie our parachute into this loop. So if you're going to do this as a single deployment model, the main parachute will tie in here. If you're doing dual deployment, the drogue parachute will tie in here. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this all back together. Okay, so there we go, starting from the aft end, our launch lug there, and then the upper body and nose cone. And this is now ready for decals. Now I just noticed that the nose cone and the upper body tube somehow got a big scratch on them. I'm going to need to repaint those. But I will show you how to do the decals here and at least get started before I end the video. I don't want to have to go back and paint everything for the video again. So as soon as we get some decals going here, we'll call it a video at that point. Alright, these are all self-adhesive decals. And I've got a little basin of water here that just has a single drop of dishwashing liquid in it. And this will help make the stickers less sticky, temporarily at least. And this means it'll be easier to reposition them. And you don't necessarily have to go with what's on the package. This is your rocket, decorate it however you like. Alright, so I'm just going to squeegee this off a little bit. Okay, and this one we want to go, or at least I want to go, with the kind of the base of the decal even with the fin line there. And this is where having a repositionable ability comes in. Okay, so now I just kind of press this down initially, not too hard, but this way I can take a look and see if it's doing what I want it to do. That looks pretty good. Once you've got the decal where you want it, then just take a tissue here and squeegee out the water. and go over the whole decal so you squish out not only the water but any air in there. Now if you want to clear coat over the decals, they suggest waiting for at least 24 hours. Okay, I'm going to turn this around. Let's see, how do I want that? I want that one there. And this one here. Alright, so I'll take the other one of the cloud decals there. And we'll go ahead and soak it. Alright, this is going to go on in the same manner here, so I want to look at about where I've got that. So if I kind of line that up there. Okay. That looks pretty close to the same there. Okay, and then we'll squeegee that one out too. Okay, and so continue the rocket doing the same thing, just as I've shown here. And as I said, when you're all done with it and you want to clear coat it, give it at least 24 hours. So I hope you had fun building this rocket with me. Have a great flight and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.